I have over 1,000 movies logged on Letterboxd, and to be fair, a few of those are short films or stand-up specials or whatever. But the point is, I've seen some movies. I have 562 films on my watch list. I started adding to it when I got my account in 2019, and I stopped for the most part around last year. I've realized there are some big movies I've never seen for some reason. Ones that are talked about or referenced often, the kind of movies people act like you're insane when you tell them you haven't seen it. I'm sorry, there's clouds going over the sky right now. So, and I had an idea. Using the filters, I filtered my watch list by most popular of all time. The movies on my watch list that the most people have seen that I somehow haven't. So, in this video, I'm taking the top 10, and from the least popular to the most popular, I'm going to work my way through it. For each movie, I'll give some preconceived thoughts and notions before I watch it, and then after watching them, I'll come back to give essentially my first impressions and thoughts after seeing them. I expect watching these to take a week or two. I have no idea.
Too late. He's been Shyamalan.
I have a very mixed view of M. Night Shyamalan's work. I grew up seeing Signs a few times on TV and Sixth Sense once or twice, and for whatever reason, I developed a distaste for those movies. Not that I'd ever consider them bad, but I just didn't care for them, and I'm sure those two are both deserving of a rewatch one day. The Last Airbender is my least favorite movie of all time, but let's be real, that's true for most people who have seen it. So it's hard to say if that's even worth mentioning. I'll admit I've seen a handful of his other movies here and there, and my views of them were colored by Doug. I'd seen Unbreakable, which is a damn good movie. I had heard wonderful things about Split when it released, and I believe that was largely due to it being seen as kind of a return to form of sorts for Shyamalan after a series of duds, and God knows they were duds. But I haven't heard a ton about this movie in the years since, and I'm not sure if that's reflective of its quality or if simply the hype and marketing died down, as well as the lukewarm reception to its follow-up Glass. Shyamalan is reliable at delivering something amusing at the very least. He has this undercurrent of a vision in most of his movies, and it's often not to my taste, but if this is one where it's good, then I'm completely excited to see it.
Rejoice!
Damn, look at that, only 2 months later. I really appreciate Split for having a very unprocessed style. Coverage is minimal and usually focused on a specific point of interest for a shot, letting the rest of the scene flow around that specific point of Shyamalan's choosing. It's a synthetic naturalism. It takes on a dejected and observational style, but the writing and acting is very artificial. Just the way people behave and the way they go about things feels off in a way that sort of floats between benefiting the movie and hurting it. The premise of the movie and the way it unfolds is very compelling. It has enough stuff happening and enough vagueness to remain intriguing the entire time. But I will say, I do think the handling of trauma as a theme here, particularly with the main character, the way the movie resolves itself particularly comes across as pretty tasteless, and ultimately I don't think it ends up saying anything. It takes what kind of feels like could have been a very fascinatingly twisted motivation for the villain, and it takes it to just being like bluntly off-putting and a little muddy. The idea that by the end the protagonist is saved for having trauma while the other characters are punished for having the privilege of being untraumatized, it's a bizarre way for the movie to frame itself. If it's trying to be empowering, it's not that. It's not thought-provoking. It's not even like twisted in a way that's entertaining. It's just strange handling of it. Oh, and the ending tie-in to Unbreakable is corny as shit, but I kind of like it, and I guess I'll be watching Glass at some point. Split rides a line between being an engaging thriller and an offbeat oddity. Ultimately, I think it rounds out to being a pretty enjoyable watch. Spielberg. This is one of his most revered works, and I believe he made it simultaneously with Jurassic Park, which is fucking wild. To me, Spielberg is one of those filmmakers where my appreciation for his career and legacy goes deeper than my actual enjoyment of his movies. He wrote the book on the modern Hollywood blockbuster. Its language is his language, but as such, I feel somewhat unmoved by his more sentimental elements that he puts in his movies. He's generally at his best for me when he's being more serious. Jaws, for example, is not only my favorite movie of his, but it's one of my favorite movies, period. I don't think I've ever seen a complete clip of this movie. So aside from the acclaim and the subject matter and my experience with Spielberg's other films, I don't actually know much about this movie. And I'm eager to see what he does with it, because it's hard to me envision that Tom Hanks and Saving Private Ryan style of sentimentality in a film like this, nor any of his other blockbuster trappings. Well, goddamn. See, it's weird I'm recording these all at once when I've watched these over the course of like too fucking long, but it is so easy to forget how good Spielberg is at his job. This movie runs at a very lean 3 hours for the most part. I think it does a good job at driving home that this is simply a very small slice of a much larger, bloodier picture. It simultaneously serves as both a remembrance and memorial and a spotlight on humanity, but also a much starker light cast upon inhumanity. Spielberg's hand more or less becomes invisible throughout most of it. You can feel the space of the room of a conversation. You feel the panic and the claustrophobia on the trains. It's a very immediate and visceral experience. The film certainly tries to find some level of hope within a tragedy that is to a scale that simply isn't comprehensible, but I don't think it ever finds an answer, nor does it really try to give one. It instead portrays this man who sits in a comfortable spot within a god-awful situation, within a position of power, who as a spirit shook awake to help all these people. These souls clinging to life in this hell that's been brought upon them. What the movie handles beautifully is that it can only really be understood within the small scale. One name on a list, one person, one life, hundreds upon hundreds of names. The final scene with Liam Neeson as he departs and he realizes suddenly, all at once, all the additional things he could have done. He looks to his possessions and sees that if he had simply sold them, he could have bought more lives to be saved. Everything is so suddenly and vividly tangible. The scene shows the perseverance of humanity and how he's embraced and comforted by the people he did manage to save, but it just drives at this absolute horror as his every possession now serves as a reminder for those he couldn't, those he didn't. Every suit and every trinket, his car, everything is a reminder of another life that could have been, another generation that could have been. The biggest criticism I will give the movie is that I find in the moments where it tries to cinematically build tension for the sake of like a set piece. I think those are generally pretty tasteless and it cheapens the film to a certain degree. It just drives home that yes, this is a product of the Hollywood machine and people, need to get their ticket price worth, and it just feels out of place. A detail I want to note is the recurring interactions where characters claim things can't get worse or how surely things are at the bottom now. Any ideas of how things could get worse for them are unrealistic, and sure enough, things continually get worse. Even once driven to slave labor, surely that's got to be the bottom, right? They need us to do this job. They can't hurt us anymore. It's a fantastic portrayal of the fact that oftentimes the simple cruelty is the point. It empowers authoritarianism to exercise its power over the other because no modern government will walk in these steps unless they intend at some point, for some reason, to go all the way. Amélie? The first and possibly only international film in this video, it's coming from France. I know nothing about it. I know the poster and the name, and I think it's one of the more relatively mainstream modern European movies in America, at least. And I say that both because of how many people have it logged on Letterboxd and that I remember seeing this face in passing before. Jesus Christ, this is a tone shift. We're still in Europe, though, so that's good. I noticed about 20 minutes in how effortlessly this movie flowed. So many asides and tangents, and yet there's always a clear direction and momentum. This is the kind of movie that just feels crafted from top to bottom. Everything is put into its place for one reason or another, and it's usually for aesthetics, but this is a movie that fucking lives by its aesthetics. It's such a unique atmosphere that's popping with color, but somehow tinged with a degree of grime. And I'd credit that grime to how it captures the Parisian environment and the very green and yellow look of the colors, which arguably dates the movie visually, but the whole style of it is so holistic, it kind of fits right in. It's like you can't imagine it any other way. It's very humorous and often gratingly so, but the obnoxious whimsy is unquestionably part of its charm. Sometimes watching weird people live in a weird story with weird storytelling choices does the heart good. The character of Amélie? Inserting herself as like this angel of justice into people's lives. It's a great way to explore this kind of like dreamy state perpetual introversion lulls you into. The whole movie slowly goads her out into actually, doing something that directly affects and fulfills her own life. I can't say I was deeply moved by the movie, but this is the kind of movie that must be seen every once in a while. It's a treat for the eyes, for the sets, the costuming, the whole visual approach, accompanied by the fantastic use of music throughout the movie, and the story is properly heartwarming. I'm more than happy to say I've finally seen it. Probably the one here I'm most familiar with. I've actually seen parts of this movie on top of it just being so iconic it's impossible not to pick up a scene or an image or two over time. Kubrick is undeniably a master, but sometimes I don't totally gel with what he's going for in terms of themes or messaging. I fully expect this movie to be miserable, and I hope something moving comes out of it.
Aggie Wax.
I'm sort of struggling with how I feel about this movie. Like I said, I had seen sections of it, but now that I have a complete picture of it, I can't say I love it, and I can't say I dislike it. It's a very miserable movie that also managed to be like relatively cheeky at the same time. My concern with it is largely due to how little I feel like it imparted a true sense of world. Something about the situations that the movie chooses to show feels strangely narrow, and I found most of them kind of unrewarding to think about. So it's only the broadest and most obvious commentary that lands with any clarity, none of which I found too interesting. But even so, the imagery, the sets, the blaring synth score, Malcolm McDowell's incredible performance, all of it just kind of sticks in the mind. I feel allured to want to find some sort of feeling or meaning from it that I just can't seem to locate anywhere. Ultimately, for me, it comes across as powerfully crafted, but ultimately gratuitous. I'm certain there's a deeper analysis that could illuminate some of the deeper meanings of the movie for me, and if you have one, feel free to leave it in the comments below. But more so than any other movie on this list, this is probably going to be the one that I look into the most, because I don't quite get it, but I don't dislike it either. But the actual execution of the movie is powerful enough that on that alone I could see it becoming a classic. So I don't know, give it time, I guess.
Two little mice fell.
Another Spielberg movie, and a star-studded one at that. I know two things about this movie. The one Simpsons episode in season 15 that kind of riffs on it, and apparently the true story it was based on is a lie, which is really funny and thankfully doesn't magically make a movie bad. Otherwise, I don't have much to say. This is the kind of movie I always knew I'd watch one day, but I needed some reason to watch it beyond pure happenstance, and this video very conveniently has made that happen.
In a bucket of cream.
Catch Me If You Can is a comfort movie injected with the greatest degree of cinematic craft. And yeah, of course, another Spielberg. I don't know how Spielberg specifically is so good at giving everything this vibrant gloss, where the production value is felt in every shot, yet it still feels grounded and authentic to the story. It's wonderfully acted. Every single person is giving a very well-rounded performance. It's just a fantastic use of an A-list cast. Circling back to what I said about it being a comfort movie, this very much feels like the kind of thing you would kind of catch when it's already 30 minutes in on TV and you just kind of chill and watch it and leave it on in the background. But no matter when you jump in, it's going to be immediately investing because the script and the directing and the acting is just so solid. But with that, it does feel like a very broad movie. It feels in touch with humanity, but not at the expense of the machinery of the craft behind it. The emotional baseline of the movie essentially being about two people using this as a means to cope with loneliness and somehow bonding over it is well utilized. There's no epiphanies or great subtextual movement here. It's just a damn well crafted ride that I could rewatch just about any day.
By the way, our son Hezekiah hates
When I
us.
looked at the movies I needed to cover for this video, I was really surprised to see this one on here because it's so recent. But it did have its day in the sun on social media, so I guess that explains it. Oh. I'm a big fan of Emma Seligman's and Rachel Sennot's previous collaboration on the movie Shiva Baby. That movie is a fantastically executed small-scale dramedy, so I'm kind of already on bottom's side going into it. This movie, man. I mentioned Shiva Baby as my reference point for what I expected from Seligman and Sennott, which is how you pronounce her name, apparently. And Bottoms is just a completely different animal, though it does kind of retain that sort of effortless flow of dialogue and movement, just used in a different tempo and setting. It's completely forward with its high school comedy premise, and the comparisons to Superbad and, by extension, 2019's Booksmart are inevitable. And I was so thrilled to see how effortlessly this movie defined itself in a way that leaned on inspiration while doing its own thing. It's at its best when it leans into absurdism and this exaggerated personality that it gives its characters. And it does it often enough, and it's always so successful. It sort of reminds me of the middle years of The Simpsons golden era, seasons 4 and 5. Not so much for the exact jokes, but more so for how it can be blatantly satirical and overtly absurd, but somehow not fracturing the reality and natural flow of the world or damaging characterization. The cast and chemistry is top-notch. It's not afraid to be broad with its comedy or characters, but each of the characters and the respective actors' performances are specific enough to make the whole thing feel properly unique. Yeah, it's a fucking hit for me. Yeah, it's the Literally Me movie. Out of every movie on my watch list, The Drive has been on there the longest, and I literally can't come up with a reason to explain why I haven't seen it, but I have seen Only God Forgives, the movie Refn and Gosling made after it, so I don't know what to do with that. I expect it to be slow and tense, and I expect someone to do some driving.
You're like me.
Drive was roughly what I expected. It's a moody, lonely LA neo-noir. I was kind of reminded of Collateral somewhat, which is a big compliment, by the way. But of course, this movie is a different animal. If I had to sum up my experience with this movie, I'd say this would have blown me away if I had watched it when I was 15, which, funnily enough, is when I initially put it on my watch list on Letterboxd. And that may sound derogatory, but I don't mean it in reference to the quality of the movie or the maturity of its writing. It's more so about my taste specifically. I've seen enough movies at this point but what this movie does isn't as moving or as fresh as it could have been had I watched it earlier. But it's certainly its own flavor, and I certainly see how it could be an all-time favorite for many people. God knows it is. It's really great for how it manages to be artistically sharp, taking more risks with the tone and pacing. It does great at letting the emotions be quiet and understated. It's arthousey enough to be unique, but it's still accessible enough with its genre elements that it's not hard to get into if you don't typically watch that kind of movie. Which is another reason why I'm absolutely sure I would have been blown away by it if I had watched it when I was 15. God, the car scenes are so expertly put together, but they're incredible. It's just tight editing and shot choices. It's raw in a way higher budget thrillers typically don't get to be. And I will also say, I didn't realize how star-studded this cast was. I swear, I only ever saw Ryan Gosling, and he's great here, but Oscar Isaac, Bryan Cranston, and Albert Brooks? Come on. Yeah, this one's embarrassing. I always kept saying I would watch the first 3 Mad Max movies first, and then I'd get to this one. And that just hasn't happened, so I'm just watching this one now. Sometimes you just gotta grow up and concoct a reason to watch Fury Road. I haven't even seen the damn thing, and its visual style is already so notable in my brain. My only fear is that it won't be able to surprise me going in, because I already feel like I kinda get it, but I'll check those thoughts at the door when I sit down to watch it. You can't watch something being like, bet you can't surprise me. Because yeah, usually not with that attitude. The greatest films disarm you into openness, but you miss out on a whole world of cinema if you won't be open to it. Now that is how you make a goddamn movie. Up front, I don't think this movie is a masterpiece, but I was absolutely floored by the sheer audacity of it. It's like what I imagine it feels like when you pop a jet in a Fallout game. The production value is off the charts. It presents this utterly bombastic world, and it's conveyed with complete tangibility. That's part of the audacity, the fact that they wrote and designed all this insanity and then actually went out into the desert and did it for real. And it somehow never feels like it falls into complete excess. It's very good at getting you to buy into the feeling of, yeah, that seems about right. This was a major tentpole studio release, and yet it has these camera movements and editing choices that straddle the line of something you would see in like a schlocky B-movie. But it's so fitting for the tone of the movie that it just feels right rather than cheap. I did sort of find myself pulling away from the movie about towards the middle section. I almost kind of wish the movie was about like 20 minutes shorter, but that probably sounds heretical to people who like this movie. Because if this is the kind of shit you're into, then you want like every second you can get your hands on. It comes down to how much mileage you personally get out of vehicle action in the movie. So it's less of an issue and more of just a feature of it. Yeah, I just respect the hell out of this movie. It's all fucking craft. I missed out on the majority of like the big Western animated hits from the second half of the 2010s, and this is just one of those. I don't have much to say other than I've heard good things and I expect to enjoy it. It's cute, but also everyone dies. And apparently they die again, which is good, or it's bad. And I gotta give Pixar's better movies a lot of credit for being able to deal with heavier, more existential themes in a way that naturally fits into a children's movie without being distracting or just shallow. This movie is excellent at creating a premise that naturally benefits the fun of an animated adventure and the ideas of death, family, and remembrance. These movies are always easy to watch, but they never really scratch the stylistic itch for me. They're just not constructed in a way that's going to greatly move me, and that's completely fine. I walked away from this very glad that I had seen it, and I'd gladly watch it again one day. I wish more animated movies could be made on this scale with the amount of publicity that Pixar gets. Because yeah, there should be movies that deal with this heavier subject matter while still having a strong sense of fun and imagination. And in addition, I think it's nice for older audiences to have these stories that are thematically meaningful without demanding a total bath in whatever sorrow or misery it wants to talk about. I can't even lie to you, I kind of came up with this video as like an excuse to finally watch this movie. Not that I need one, but it seemed like a fun idea. For years, people have told me to watch it, and for years, I was like, I'll get to it, but I want to watch Scorsese's earlier movies first. But I've seen the movies he made after, I don't know, whatever, man. Over the last couple months, I've been reflecting on Scorsese's work, and I felt my appreciation deepening for them, both as individual films, but also as this collective body of work, and it just feels like time to watch this one. For frankly, I think it's premature for me to write any definitive opinion I have about this movie. As of recording this, I literally watched it like 2 days ago. I will certainly need more time and a rewatch to really define how I feel about it, but I'm making this video, so of course I'm going to give my immediate thoughts. I am very mixed on The Wolf of Wall Street. Martin Scorsese is unquestionably one of the greatest filmmakers to ever live, and I adore many of his movies. I'm just endlessly fascinated by how much range and variety his filmography shows. And in this movie, he's got some of the finest actors just absolutely killing it. It's masterfully shot and edited and performed. It's some of his best work as a director. The film is very clearly about greed and excess, with some white-collar crime thrown in for good measure. And Scorsese, he's always making films about awful people getting rich and living big, doing awful things, and then tracking the downfall and the consequences of, their actions. And that's a formula he returns to repeatedly throughout his career. He's excellent at conveying it and using it to explore whatever themes he wants within the stories. Where I struggle with this movie is that I simply don't feel it's convincing in its negative portrayal. It instantly sets up how bizarre and unhinged the world of Wall Street is. It repeatedly shows these characters doing awful and petty things. It's clearly aware of what it's showing. The hiccup being is that I simply think it leans too heavily into the comedic side of the story. And nearly everything shown in the office or around the debauchery is written and timed in a way that warrants laughter or reaction. Too many dialogue scenes just kind of trickle down into comedic banter that goes back and forth. And none of these things are bad on their own, it just does the storytelling a disservice for how much time it spends on that aspect of the story. It heavily dilutes the messaging of the movie, and by extension, it undercuts the whole reason why it's choosing to show us a story about someone like Jordan Belfort. And the fall of the characters is mostly focused on the criminal investigation, and it leans heavily on that, and them getting arrested and indicted for their financial crimes. And by leaning so heavily into this side of the narrative, it twists the story into showing Jordan as some sort of prideful Icarus who flew too close to the sun till his luck ran out. It leaves the madness of the whole previous hour of the movie feeling like the good old days. And I love the statement that the movie makes with its specific, final shot. It's amazing. I love the bit with the fucking prison. It's fantastic. But it's simply not as effective as it should have been. So the film just sort of feels like watching ghoulish parasites and their antics, and any shoe that the film drops feels a limp in comparison. And there's little room left to truly feel how absurd and rotten even the legal side of the whole thing is. And I honestly kind of feel like the whole thing would have been better served if it had dropped the exact story and names of those involved. It should have just simply taken inspiration from a true story rather than making itself about the true story. Not only does it somewhat fail in its attempt to condemn these characters by indulging in the humor and energy too much, but now it weirdly galvanizes the people involved, which is just it's just, It is often entertaining, and I do truly think it is still a good movie, but I was somewhat disappointed, and that's because Scorsese's other films are just so good at making their points without sacrificing the audience's immersion in the situation. Considering how hard The Irishman and Killers of the Flower Moon lean into the unpleasant and depressing sides of their stories, I wonder if that's somewhat an intentional reaction to this film, because the contrast and approach is so stark. Just ultimately, if you're trying to understand what I'm trying to say with this movie, just watch Goodfellas and then watch Wolf of Wall Street, and there's such a distinct difference in the way it portrays its characters. While both manage to be entertaining, I think a movie like Goodfellas is just simply more successful in executing what it wants to do. And that's the 10 most popular movies on Letterboxd that were on my watch list. I gotta say, it feels good to finally see all these, both because there's not a single film here that doesn't have something interesting going on with it. Clearly, this would have been a different list if I had more movies on my watch list or used a site like IMDb, but I think Letterboxd is probably the best tool for movie discovery. And I am sad to say that none of these movies really outright surprised me or moved the needle in my perspective of movies, but once you reach a certain point where you've seen enough, it's rare for that to happen. That's partially why making a video like this appealed to me. It's just like, let's explore movies, You can never really say you've seen it all. And Lord knows there's nothing to be gained by being stubborn at watching popular or mainstream things. If I like how this turns out, one day I might do like a second part to this video, or some variation of it. Hey, and while you're here, go and follow my Letterboxd. I post everything I watch there, with the occasional review. Links are in the description. And a like and subscribe goes a long way in supporting the channel, if you want more videos like this. And I'm gonna run away now.